everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Astrology. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about fertility and how astrology can be a wonderful tool to help couples or individuals conceive and have children. And we're also going to be looking at chart examples during this episode. Joining us today, we have esteemed astrologer, author, and lecturer Nicola Smuts-Allsop, who will be conducting a free webinar this Saturday, November 12th. So if you would like to join this free webinar, please see the link below this video in the description. So thank you so much, Nicola, for joining us today. And how are you doing?
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. I'm so looking forward to this episode. As I was saying to you before the recording, I watched you and Chris in the very in-depth episode. So I'm very excited for this one today. So before we get into chart examples, which you brought with you today, could you maybe explain to the viewers what the topic of fertility astrology is and how you came to specialize in this very important topic?
Okay, so it was by accident that I came to specialize, because I had started seeing clients some 20 odd years ago. And I had, in the first sort of 6 months of my practice, I had 7 pregnancies that are predicted to the day. And it was a bit overwhelming as a new astrologer. I know, it was like really weird. And the one most miraculous, my favorite of all, is my very first pregnancy, which is the chart of Amanda, which we'll have a look at briefly. And so once that happened, what happened is that people talk. You know, I live in a small community. Well, then I lived in Cape Town, and people spoke, and suddenly I got all the people who were struggling. They started to come to me. So also, what kind of strikes you is when you do make that kind of prediction, it is very, you see the power of astrology, and it can be, like I said, overwhelming, but it also, I don't know, it kind of filled me with a greater sense of responsibility to understand, like, what had I seen and why did that work? And if I'm going to be doing this again, like, I better know what, you know, like what actually worked and what didn't. So I spent kind of the last 20 years figuring out these charts and figuring out what was it, because we all enter charts in a different way, and not everybody goes through every chart the same way. So we are all led by a certain symbolism or a signature or something that takes us to a, you know, a narrative that we begin, shall we say. And sometimes it's something so simple that starts off the process, and then you work out afterwards, but how could it be something so simple? So it's like a simple transit of, you know, Jupiter Uranus or what have you, and then you make this outlandish, you know, unreal prediction, and then it happens, and then you want to find out, okay, what's under the chart? What did I see but not see at the time? Because I think we are pattern makers, and I think we see more cycles than we're aware of. And I think if you have thoroughly immersed yourself in astrology, you probably you know more than you think you know, and you know it subconsciously. So I was always teasing out, like, you know, what had I seen but not seen. But anyway,
wonderful. And going back and 7 correct predictions, that's quite mind-blowing. So over the years you've developed your own particular system and taken things from medieval astrology as well, is that correct?
So I did do the whole medieval journey. I did a diploma course with Bernadette Brady, which was very enlightening in terms of, and I read John Frawley. I must actually give him credit where it's due. Back in the day when I was practicing, we had dial-up internet, and we had the Yahoo groups. We had the Real Astrology group, and
oh, I remember Yahoo, yeah, the chatting groups.
But they were, I mean, it was brutal, because you had to post your chart and your question first thing in the morning, and then you'd only, like, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon would you get some answers. So your question would go on for weeks while you were unpacking it. But it gave you time, and it actually honed skills like writing up astrology and writing up your astrology thoughts in a succinct way, because you didn't have a lot of time and you didn't have a lot of space. And it also, we shared a lot. And in those days, like I said, we were scrabbling around for all kinds of texts. And then people like Bernadette and John Frawley kind of had interesting ways to look at dignity of planets. So we have to take this astrology, which is a technology from several thousand years ago, if you want to go all the way back to Egypt, and then we have to integrate it into, you know, the new millennium. So we have to find a new way of looking at those dignities and a new way of seeing how they behave. So that's always my challenge, is is we have IVF, and IVF can outperform astrology because it wasn't around when astrology was around. And it's a medical technique that is wonderful. And I'm pro science and pro like using everything that we can. But it's very mechanical. So what I'm saying is, just because the astrology technology is old doesn't mean that it's obsolete.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of like merge the two. And I want to say, okay, we commentate on the quality of time. Can we just bring that to the table? And we can work around the other issues with science, but we also need to reinterpret the science back into the astrology. So I'm always trying to find ways of describing, so what does a moon Mars opposition mean, and in modern IVF treatments. So and what was useful for me was I've actually been through IVF myself. So having been through it, and then as an astrologer, having an awareness of all of that symbolism, I went, oh, that's that, this is this. And it was like, so
having a personal connection through your own particular journey. And I believe you've actually worked with doctors as well. Is that correct? Or
I do. I've got some favorite doctors in London, and they love working with me because for them, when a new couple comes to see them, they've got to answer the God question, because everybody comes and says, are we playing God? And is this like the right thing, the wrong thing? Like, where do we position that? And then the other question that they get is they only get 10 or 15 minutes, and they feel it's very unsatisfactory. They just get told a lot of information. And then,
as you say, it's very dry, very mechanical in those type of areas.
Very, and processed. And then they also have to choose when to have the IVF, but they don't know how to choose. And then what happens is that one or the other will choose. And then if it doesn't work, there's blame. And it's just, there's a lot of decision making that is that's tough on a couple. So the doctors like it when my patients arrive, because I've already told them everything about IVF. So all the questions, the everyday questions, how many injections, when, how, there, whatever, that's been discussed. I've done the God question. I've gone through their nurturing and the psychological profiling, underneath it. And I've made it more, how can I say, mainstream for them. So they're familiar with terms that they're suddenly hearing. And they come with their charts, to my doctors at least, and they say, Nikki says we must have treatment here, here, and here. And they go, okay, fine, because nobody can have more than 3 treatments a year. The doctors don't care when you're going to put it, because you're a privately paying client.
And I believe that even the success rate of IVF isn't particularly high. I don't know if that's changed over the last few years.
It's not that high. So you have a 65 to 75% success rate if you do 3 IVFs.
Okay.
But you have to do all 3 in order to get that success rate. So that's not brilliantly high.
And it must be a very stressful time. I mean, working with the clients that you've got, if they've got these issues on mind. And again, going back to before, a very important topic, because I mean, you have a lot of clients that come to you, and a lot of the questions are around relationships and so on. But how, talking about children or having a family I think is really high up there, and such an important topic. But again, it must be very stressful for these couples or individuals going through this. So it seems like you're lending a bit of heart as well with these people. It's not too dry and mechanical, and using astrology as a timing tool as well.
I would say that at least half of my consultation is dispensing very common sense advice, and reassuring them that they are sort of more normal than they think. So a lot of women have had terminations, and they might think that having the termination has led them to now not falling pregnant as some kind of weird karma, and we have to address that. Some people think that that they can't have children on their own because like having a child within the bonds of marriage is better, but they don't understand that 2 out of 3 marriages ends up in divorce, so there's no guarantee anyway, so you being a single parent. So I kind of defrag all of that stuff. And yeah, there are heartbreaking stories, and there's some difficult stories. I mean, I do serve the LGBTQ community, and they have profound issues. Some of them have to stop medication in the middle of transitioning, and they have to potentially, how can I say, breach their own sort of biological narrative in order to have children. So it's not only money that they're going to lose. A lot is at stake for them. So, getting it right so that they can have like only 1 year off their hormonal treatment to transition, and not like more. And therefore, like, you're putting them on hold. You're putting them in a limbo period where they can't naturally be themselves or who they want to be while they're trying to have a baby. And so you want to shorten that. So yeah, there are difficulties everywhere.
And I think that speaks to astrology as well, because obviously not just doing the timing and the tools and, having people with us, but there's an element, I mean, we've got ethics involved, but even to a certain degree, like that counseling issues that come into play, again, dealing with very heightened emotions or very stressful situations, I'm guessing, for many people. And I'm sure even more in particular in the area that you specialize in.
I'm quite clear on one thing, and that is I don't want to be, and nor am I qualified as a counseling psychologist.
Right.
So I'm very boundaried. I'm a proper 10th house Capricorn.
Yeah.
Very boundaried. So it's like my caveat is, you do know I'm not a medical doctor, right? That's the first word usually out of my mouth. But then it's also like I'm going to allude or refer to certain issues which might be like underneath the chart, and it's up to you whether you want to go and deal with it in therapy. However, I never ever recommend that a couple starts intensive couples therapy while they're doing IVF, because one of them is on hormones, and those hormones are powerful, and they make you sad, they make you depressed, and they make you angry, and so you're not normal, you're not yourself. So having deep therapy is not a solution. For me, it's about recognizing how we are in the world, and then saying to just appreciating that and honoring that. So a lot of the stresses I find in relationships are where we have an expectation of ourselves and how the other person is going to behave. When we realize through the experience of astrology that we are all unique, we all think differently, and we can't change the way that we think, so why should somebody else be able to change the way that they think? Once we kind of sort that out, then and I'm also deeply stoic. So when we head off into like acceptance, then I think what we do get is we get like a much more fast-tracked understanding of, I can fight this, but it's not going to help, or I can just go with this kind of flow, and in this moment while I'm trying to achieve parenthood, I'm actually going to put all of those things on hold, and we can get back to it. But just even in that process, and just even having that kind of gives them the tools to actually go with the flow when they're going to become a parent. Because I always say to couples, gee, wow, if you think this is hard now, it's going to get incrementally more difficult when the baby's actually here. So best we learn a bit of resilience and tolerance for this process. There's no like Hallmark movie moment that stays forever.
Absolutely. And do past clients still come to you, the ones that you've helped through these processes? It must be just wonderful to work with these people that you've worked with in the past.
So I give 3 years advance, like timings, because I'm also very aware that people's resources are stretched, especially when they're trying to pay for IVF. So I'm saying I'm not on the inexpensive end. I think I'm sort of an average fee. I do sometimes 2 up to 5 charts for whatever. But I don't want them to feel like they need to keep coming back, because that's not fair on them. So I say, here's 3 years worth of timings. I said, if something changes, come back to me. But some people feel embarrassed that they've needed an astrologer to be there at the thing. And because I don't give the pregnancy tests, and I never ever, you'll never catch me harassing someone or emailing them afterwards saying, did you get pregnant or whatever. Even if I bumped into them at the supermarket pushing a pram, it's private. And for them,
if they want to divulge that information,
So, but I have had a lot of people who obviously do get back to me, and I've had wonderful clients. So my YouTube video channel is full of fantastic stories. Wonderful. And they've been very gracious in sharing them, and it's I'm grateful for that. But no, I don't often get feedback.
Wow, absolutely fantastic. So we're actually going to look into a particular area. So we're looking at the Almuten of pregnancy, and I think we're going to look at one of your chart examples.
Yeah, so I thought I would start off with, and I'm going to share my screen. I thought I'd start straight away with the Almuten of pregnancy, because the Almuten of pregnancy is it's an algorithm. It's kind of the sum of a whole lot of parts. It's a compound algorithm, and it was this particular one, the Almuten of pregnancy, was written up by Omar of Tiburas in his book on nativities, and it's out of print, but you can get it. It's I know Chris Brennan's got a digital version, and there are some versions around, but Omar created a lot of Almutens for quite a few things. He and Bonatti was also quite keen on Almuten. So I know Guido Bonatti has an Almuten for profession. And so often if you open up your Almuten page in Solar Fire, for instance, you'll see that there are Almutens for profession, health, sexual, whatever. But there was never one for pregnancy. And I'll tell you why, is because the pregnancy one is kind of different. So, I mean, this is fairly self-explanatory. We're going to move on to the next slide. The Almuten of Pregnancy is slightly different in that it has like 6 positions, and then it says at the end, any planet in the 5th.
Okay.
So it means that you then have to cast your eye. You can't program your computer. So I think that's why that Solar Fire didn't put it in, because you can't cast your eye.
And for those who are watching, how would you explain Almuten?
An Almuten is it's the sum of something. So basically, we're going to be using it's the collection of essential dignities of a planet around a certain topic. So for me, the modern astrology that says the planet that has the most to say about you getting pregnant is the ruler of the 5th house.
Right.
That's kind of not enough.
Yeah, we don't get too much information that way.
No. So Omar said you needed a physical body. So here's your physical body, the ascendant. So what you would do is you would take the degree of the ascendant. And then he said, but the ruler of the ascendant also has strength and dignity. So you need to do the degree of where is that ruler of the ascendant in the chart? What is their degree and who has dignity there? And then we need the ruler of the moon and the 5th house cusp and the ruler of the 5th house cusp and the position of Jupiter. And because obviously Jupiter is your ability to draw luck. If you've got a really, detrimented Jupiter, that's sometimes difficult.
Yeah.
And then any planet in the 5th gets an extra 5 points. So the way
this is a more comprehensive list of looking through, not just like, what's in the 5th or the ruler of the 5th. You've got a whole comprehensive list that you can use to build up this score of and talking about essential dignity and strength, planetary strength.
Exactly. So how to do it is, and I'm going to teach this again on Saturday, but I just felt like sometimes people need to hear it more than once. So I thought if anybody's, that then they do need to hear it more than once. So if we look at a chart, so this is the chart of Amanda. So we'll see we've got the ascendant here at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And we've got, so the positions that we're looking at is the ruler of the ascendant is Saturn. The degree of the ruler is the 18 of Capricorn. We're going to take into consideration plus 0 degrees of Aquarius. And then we've got the moon, where our moon is over here. And then we're going to say it's 17 degrees of Aquarius. And then we're going to have the ruler of the moon. So Saturn comes in again at 18 degrees of Capricorn. Then we're going to do the ruler of the 5th house cusp, which is Venus. So we've got to go look at Venus. And then we're going to say the degree of the 5th house cusp. So then we're going to do who has dignity at 25 degrees of Taurus. And then we're going to look at Jupiter. And then are there any planets in the 5th house? No. So the way in which I do it, and there's a table at the end of my book. So if you buy my book, at the back, there's a little worksheet. And this is what the worksheet looks like. So these are the points of the charts that we're going to take. And then I write them out like this because we're going to do it like this. So the first line, approaching this to calculate the Almuten of pregnancy by hand would be the ascendant at 0 degrees of Aquarius means that by Dorothean triplicity, Mercury, sorry, let me start again. It's 5 points for rulership, 4 points for exaltation, 3 points for a triplicity ruler, 2 terms for term, and one for face. Okay. So you'll find, okay, so the ruler of 0 degrees of Aquarius is Saturn. So Saturn gets 5 points. But Saturn is in an, Aquarius is in an air sign. So we get the 3 triplicity rulers of air signs, which are Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn. They each get 3 points. So in the terms of Mercury, using
and of course, we're using traditional rulers here.
Yeah, only traditional rulers.
Only traditional rulers.
And also we're using Egyptian terms. I'll show you the table afterwards.
Okay.
So then Mercury gets 2 points, and then it's in the face of Venus. So Venus gets 1. So then we move on down, and now we're going to do this, and this is how we do it again. So we want to go, the ruler of the ascendant is Saturn. Where is Saturn? Saturn's at 18 degrees of Capricorn. Saturn gets 5 points for rulership again, and obviously being it's in an Earth triplicity, so Venus, Mars, and Moon get 3 points. Plus it's in the terms of Venus, and it's in the face of Mars. Mars is also in exaltation, so it gets 4 extra points there. So we write that down, and then we go to the next one, which will be the moon. And then we've got the same story again. the moon is ruled by Saturn, so Saturn gets 5 points. It's an air triplicity, so the Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn get 3 points again, and so on. So we get, this is the way we do it all the way through. We could go through, but it'll take too much time.
It seems like Saturn's running up a score here.
Oh, isn't it just? Look at that, 40 points. Okay.
Wow.
So what does this mean to have Saturn as your Almuten of pregnancy? Most people go, oh, gosh, para, I don't want Saturn. Saturn, this is terrible. But what it does is suddenly it turns Saturn's complexion into something good. So Saturn is the one planet that will bring you babies. So instead of having to worry about Saturn transiting your 5th house, you actually want Saturn in your 5th house. So it changes the complexion completely, and it almost doubles your chances of getting pregnant because you have more opportunities than other people.
Oh, wow.
So if
so it's not to panic too much if the Almuten becomes a malefic. Is that the general sense?
It changes. It's just only in the topic of pregnancy, it changes its kind of complexion. So what we see, we then go back to the chart and we say, okay, now we're going to describe like how are they going to get pregnant? What is the nature of them getting pregnant? Like what is the story around them getting pregnant? So we see that it's Saturn in Capricorn. So we go, yay, Almuten is strong. It's in rulership. But it is in the 12th house. Let's face it, it's not in the sign of the ascendant, but it's okay. It also rules the ascendant, but it itself
do you
is
not bring planetary joys into this equation?
No, planetary joys don't come into this because they don't have a numeric value.
Okay.
They're simply joy. They don't joy to the degree of 4 points or 5 points. So
okay, right, okay.
Can't get, but you would look at it and say, oh, Saturn likes being here or Saturn likes being there. So we look at that, but then the Almuten of pregnancy is conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter is detrimented in fall in Capricorn.
I'm having a great time there.
But it's okay because Saturn gets a bonus because it is conjunct Jupiter. So you go, that's really interesting. And then of course Saturn is like squaring this 4th house cusp and all of this little tight Aries nonsense happening over here. And so we go, I'm going to Amanda, if she saw me when she was 20, which she didn't, she saw me when she was 43. I'd say, you know what, you do have a chance. It's going to be hidden. It's going to be like there's going to be something hidden about it, or not overt, or not, or like weird and wonderful. It's going to involve like a stroke of good fortune, and it is very much, but it is possible.
Wow.
So
do you look at the relationship between, is Venus ruling the 5th, and the relationship between Venus and Saturn? So what have we got, like an applying square there? So do you take these into consideration?
You do. You take everything. You take everything in. But again, I didn't want to spend too much time doing a whole delineation.
Oh, sure. Okay.
But that's exactly how you would take it. The broad story of this chart, just so that I can tell a little bit of the story while we're looking at that chart, is that she went overseas. She met this man, and they had a wild romantic fling, and she came back to her country of origin pregnant. But it wasn't a relationship. It was a fling. So she had a termination. But it turns out that she made more of an impact on him than she realized, and he came back to her country of origin, and they started a relationship, and they got married. And they then tried to have children, and it didn't work. Nothing. For 7 years. And they tried all sorts of reproductive treatments. They tried all sorts of things, and his family were very keen on them having children, and eventually the tension about having children broke them up, and he went to go live in another country. She then tried 4 more years of artificial inseminations and trying to get pregnant. And the reason why apparently they couldn't get pregnant was there was something wrong with his sperm, but I don't know exactly what it was. But that was one of the reasons given.
And you're taking cultural considerations here as well. So this fella, he came from a place where it was expected, was it, in a cultural sense, to have children?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So anyway, so he went off and moved to another country. So she then tried for 4 more years on her own. And I met her at a cocktail party, and she asked me, would I be able to make some judgments about her chart? She wants to ask me about something. Yes, made an appointment. She came to see me, and she asked me all about her work. She was the CEO of a listed company, and she wanted to ask me about bonuses, this, that, and the next thing. I made some predictions, and hey ho, they came to pass, and she was really happy. She came back to me and she said, okay, now I actually want to talk to you about the thing I really wanted to talk to you about, but I'm a bit like vulnerable and what have you, and I just needed to figure out if this could be helpful or not. I said, okay, what is it? She said, no, I'm going to adopt a baby, but before I adopt the baby, because I'm a single mom and I don't have any family here, they are going to interview everyone at my work. And this is very vulnerable for me, and I'm very private, and I'm feeling like I don't want to go through this unless there's a baby at the end of it. So what do you see? So all I saw, and I'll go to the transit chart, all I saw was, and then she told me the story about the husband and the whatever, and all I saw was this thing, this Jupiter retrograding back into a conjunction with Uranus. So that's the thing that said, what gift returns to both you and your husband? There's a returning gift. And so I just went, well, actually, give me a moment. And I went off and I did my chart, and I came back and I said, on January the 8th, which is on this particular day, on January the 8th, your ex-husband and you will have sex, and you will have a baby on the 26th of September or something.
Wow.
And she said, no, you weren't listening. You know, we can't have children. Tried. He's also an ex. And so it's actually harder to establish a sexual relationship than it is with an ex than it is with a stranger. And so it's going to be, this is difficult. So I said, no, well, I don't have another story for you, but like, give it a month and come back to me. And in that month, what had happened was her sister immigrated to Israel. The ex phoned her from Dubai, of all places, and said, you know what, I know you're upset that your sister's moving. Why don't you come and visit me on the weekend of January the 8th? And she rang me up and said, what do I do? I said, pack your bags if you want to get pregnant. And she packed her bags and went off to visit him for a weekend, had sex all weekend, and came home and then said, now what? I said, well, like, we got to wait 2 weeks.
Right.
So, and she was pregnant. And then,
wow. Oh my days. That's
I know, but
incredible.
the story is more interesting. So she then decided, for reasons of her own, there's no judgment ever here, not to tell him initially. And so we're looking at this Almuten in the 12th house, and she's deciding not to tell the father of the child. So anyway, as time goes by, now she's phoning me every week, and I've now got to do cards and charts and everything to see that this pregnancy is going to stick. This was a very like testing time. She then says to me, I need to tell you.
It gets more because at this point is she so she's what, 42 at this particular point in time.
Yeah. So her chances are less than 1% of doing this event.
Wow.
Less than 1%. So then she comes back and she says, oh, you know what? She said, I must tell you something. My mother's just informed me. Her mother was still alive. My mother's just informed me that actually I'm not the blood sister to my sister. She said, I can't believe it. My mother had an affair while she was married, and my father who I thought was my father is not my father.
Whoa. Wow.
There's this father figure that sits here in the 12th. He's in rulership.
Yep.
He's alive and well. And now, and do you see but the mother had never told the father. So you just see that Amanda is now repeating the same narrative of the mother without actually even realizing it.
Wow, that is absolutely mind-blowing.
She stepped into this whole thing.
Yeah.
So she did finally tell the husband, also look at the sun. So I also want to say is that at that age, it's a 7th house profection ruled by the sun.
So Lord of the Year is sun.
Yeah, okay. Is the sun. And I'm sorry, that's quite like specific on that day. So I thought that was just like an interesting, there were a couple of other interesting things that were going on, but I thought that was particularly good. And also just for our viewers to point out that Saturn is trawling the 5th house. And if you'd gone to a modern astrologer might have said, nah, you're never going to get pregnant during this time period.
That's a great point, because they might have said maybe the delays or restrictions or whatever, but you're using, again, a more comprehensive, more sophisticated, it seems, system of putting these pieces together.
So that's just very, very interesting to note.
Wow. Wow. And as you explain in this story, again, it just, astrology just every day blows my mind when you just see, chart examples or, this story, and you see it right there, everything that Jupiter you've got going through, like you said, 7th house perfected year. So partnerships, and then Lord of the Year, the sun, and what's happening at that stage. I mean, it's incredible, amazing.
But also, I mean, the fact is that the Almuten of pregnancy is traveling with Jupiter here. And it's not so surprising that the friend of the Almuten of Pregnancy is triggering this Uranus over there. So it's also quite, by perfection, we highlight the Saturn, but we have to highlight, we're highlighting by sign because it's perfection. And then the Jupiter is here on the Uranus. I think when we're looking at technique, while I love very in-depth modern technique, one must remember that if you are a Mesopotamian astrologer, you cannot see a midpoint in the sky. So you tend to see the blunt, obvious things. You might not even have an ephemeris table in your head, let alone a recorded copy anywhere to hand. So you're basically relying on, if you know somebody's birthday, you're relying on perfections more than anything, and you're waiting for perfection to be triggered by a transit. That's kind of your most rudimentary kind of technique that you would use, because it's visual. You were using visual astrology.
Amazing. And there's such a fascinating example, and it seems like you're laying many techniques. So when you're working with couples, I mean, do you start off with in quotes the natal promise, and then you're layering these techniques together? So you're doing the Almuten of Pregnancy. It looks like you bring in perfections, other techniques. I think I've heard you talk about solar arcs as well. So layering all these techniques and then starting to divulge or to pull out this information, where other techniques, where, as you said, maybe, modern would maybe look at this Saturn and just off that say, well, this is going to be difficult. You're actually, again, more comprehensive, layering these techniques together to get a more rich picture of what might be coming.
Or what Saturn is exactly in the chart.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding what the planets mean in your chart, what can they give, what can't they give, and when they're going to give. And we can't live our whole charts all together every day. So that's why perfections are very useful to understand, that each year we focus on a different sort of aspect of our chart, and a different it has a different feeling, if you like. That's why I love opening my solar return chart on my birthday. It's kind of like, this is, for me, it's like a ritual. It's like, oh yay, it's like, what is this year going to bring?
See, what's happening? What topics are coming up?
It's like, yeah, I know. I think I've got a 10th house coming up.
It's like, yeah, I've got 9th house stellium this year. So I was like, oh, podcasting, talking about astrology. There you go. Well,
Good.
Okay, well, wonderful.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to talking about a couple's chart, where I'll go through kind of how I also look at the medical things, the diagnoses that are under the chart. So we'll have a brief dive into some of that. But it's the story of Lyndall and Dennis, and it is on my YouTube channel. So if people want to go and have a little bit of a look beforehand, that's also great. But we'll deep dive into their charts, and I demonstrate two failed IVFs. So I'll show you what a failed IVF looks like, and I'll show you what a successful IVF looks like. And then I'll show you that, okay, now once you've gotten them pregnant, especially when you're dealing with triplets. So this particular chart, there were triplets. You're dealing with a high-risk pregnancy, and recognizing the pitfalls of a high-risk pregnancy, and being able to save a couple from some severe drama by saying, this is your most likely date that you're going to have your baby. I know it's only 30 weeks, but be near a hospital, and then having them experience exactly that. So it's their charts are also fantastic, but I'll go through those in detail on Saturday.
Wonderful. So for those, how can they find you? Just type your name into YouTube, or do you have a particular handle for
just
YouTube?
Fertility Astrology and YouTube, and you'll get it there. Yeah.
Wonderful. And you also have a fantastic book that you wrote called Fertility Astrology. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Wonderful. And how, if for anybody interested, have you got a website people can go to, or where can they purchase this book?
Yeah, so they can purchase it through my website. They can purchase it on Amazon, and it's also with Wessex Astrology. But if you go to my website, you'll get a link. It'll take you there.
Wonderful. Yes. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And to remind everybody, I'll be there as well. So I'll be hosting, and Nicola will be there, and she'll be doing the webinar on fertility astrology. And I'm trying to think of the time. What time is it on Saturday? Pacific. I'll have to look that up. Anyway, you'll see the link below this video in the description, and the various pop-ups throughout this video. So come and join us. It's a free webinar, so you can sign up, link up in this very fascinating topic.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and have a wonderful day.